Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'll be sharing only my personal stories, or as I like to call them, the Real Rockford Files. Let's get into it. Today's episode is going to be a large compilation of all paranormal encounters I have ever experienced in my life that I can remember, or at least as many as I can fit into one video. The first story happened before I was born and was told to me by my late parents, and they weren't the type to make up stories. It was 1982, I believe. My oldest brother, Aaron, wasn't even 1 year old yet. He was at that stage where he can already pull himself up on his feet and stand at the side of his crib and would try to talk that baby gibberish that has no actual words but sounds like a full conversation. At the time, they lived in a trailer, just the three of them. The trailer had two doors, both on the same side, but the farthest one didn't have a porch, so it wasn't used and kept locked with a normal lock and a chain lock. Inside the house, my brother's crib was in the room next to my parents and right up against the door with no porch. Not the best place for a baby, but I digress. It was nighttime. My brother had been put to bed, lights out, and my parents were in their room. After a few minutes, they heard my brother talking that baby gibberish, and very loudly. He was having a very animated conversation with... That's when they thought, who's he talking to? My dad went into the room, flipped on the light, and my brother was standing facing the door that led outside and kept on talking. I imagine his blood ran cold when he noticed the door was open, just a crack because that's all the chain lock would allow. He grabbed my brother and closed and relocked the door. Could have been a prowler or kidnapper, but what makes me believe it was something else was the fact that my dad didn't hear anyone move away from the trailer. The ground around the trailer was all gravel and rocks, and makes a lot of noise when walked on. Not a sound. Fast forward a few years, and my parents would have 3 kids now. My brother Aaron, Sean, and me. I'm somewhere between 3 and 5 years old at this time. We lived in the Jane Addams projects in Rockford, right next to the Rock River. It was right around the time the My Buddy dolls were on TV all the time. For those who don't know, a My Buddy doll was basically the inspiration for Chucky from Child's Play. Well, this commercial song got burned into my wee little brain, and I had to have one. My parents noticed me singing the song constantly and got me a My Buddy. The first day I'm home with it, I was in the living room and my parents were in the kitchen. I walked into the kitchen with a look of disbelief on my face, something my parents didn't notice, or if they did, they didn't react. My mom asked me, "What's his name?" referring to the doll. I then said with a confused look on my face, "He said his name is Baby Bobby." Again, my parents didn't pick up on my wording and just assumed I named him that. But what they didn't know is that just before I walked into the kitchen, I was playing with my doll. I grabbed his hand and said, "What's your name, buddy?" Then he answered, "Baby Bobby." That's when I went into the kitchen. Well, being a little kid, I quickly forgot how scared I got when Baby Bobby told me his name and continued to play with him. Over the next week, Baby Bobby would talk to me every time we were alone. I can't recall what about, random kid stuff that Baby Bobby seemed to bring up. I guess my parents paid more attention than I thought, because they definitely noticed this and were disturbed by it. I wondered if they heard Baby Bobby talk too. Either way, one day I awake to find Baby Bobby is gone. My parents threw him away and told me they killed Baby Bobby. Forgive my parents, they thought telling me that was funny. Regardless, my doll was gone. I didn't know how to feel about it, a little mad and a little relieved at the same time. A few days go by, and I'm walking down the basement stairs to rummage through our boxes looking for treasure. Got about 5 feet from the steps in the basement and felt like I should look behind me, so I did. Our basement steps have about half a foot gap between each step so you can see under the stairs. And what do I see peeking through one of those gaps? Baby Bobby. I ran over, brushed basement dirt off him, and ran upstairs to show my parents. The look on their faces when I came into the kitchen holding that doll, yelling, "Baby Bobby came back! He came back!" That was truly the last time I see that doll. My parents took it and got rid of it for good. I don't know exactly what they did with it, but I think they threw him in the river. The reason I think this is a recurring dream I had for a while after that, where I'm standing on the bridge over the river and I throw Baby Bobby in, then watch him sink. The next story takes place quite a few years later, a few house moves later, in 95 or 96. My parents would now have 5 kids, aged 3 to 13, from eldest to youngest, Aaron, Sean, myself, Christopher, and Daniel, and soon to be 6 with my mother pregnant with my newest brother Michael. Also, this story I believe to be not so paranormal as it was a mean, horribly cruel prank. My mother would go into labor more than 3 weeks early, and my brother Michael was born prematurely. He stayed in the ICU for 3 days with a machine to help him breathe. On the 3rd day, the doctors, without asking my parents first, decided they wanted to unhook the machine to see if Michael's lungs were strong enough to breathe on his own. Turns out they weren't strong enough, and they couldn't revive him. So less than a week into Michael's life, and a funeral for him is being arranged. This is where the maybe paranormal, maybe prank happens. The week leading to the funeral, and a few days after, we kept getting a phone call. My mom was the first to answer, and when she started crying and hung up, we all took turns answering and cussing out whoever was on the other end, telling them to stop calling. It was the same thing every time. When I'd answer, I'd hear music, the kind that plays from those little wind-up music boxes, accompanied by a baby crying. It was heartbreaking and rage-inducing to think someone would do this after the baby died. The next story wouldn't happen until 97 or 98. I'd have another brother added to the bunch, Colton, born in 97, so now there's 6 of us living, 7 plus our dead brother Michael. We lived in a different place. Now we're in a duplex on South 3rd Street. And one day, just random occurrence, never happened before or never happened again, I was in the house alone, and I walked in through the living room into the front bedroom. I opened up the door, and there's a light fixture on the inside of the door, just to the right. And I take one step in the room, and that light dims, like if it had one of those knobs you turn to dim the lights, but there's not one of those, it's a regular switch. That light goes out, and immediately there's a light in the corner of the room. And when the light in the corner of the room gets brighter, I can see it's a street lamp. And as soon as it's bright enough, the entire room is just gone, and I'm standing on a street corner, and there's dead bodies all over the ground, or they look like they're decrepit and pieces missing. They start crawling towards me, and I blinked, and I was back in my room. Really weird, never happened again. My next haunting wouldn't occur until almost a decade later. It was the year 2005, and my girlfriend was pregnant with my son, Jaden. And we'd spend the night at her house, then we'd spend the night at my house, go back and forth. And after she was pregnant, a couple of different times, we'd be sleeping, it'd be nighttime, pitch black in her room, every light's turned off, no night light plugged into no walls, so it's pitch black. And the radio would turn itself on and crank the music all the way up. Now, when this happens in the middle of the night, it's terrifying. First time it happened, I got up and I wasn't sure I wanted to even go near the stereo, but somebody had to turn it off. So some time goes by, and my girlfriend's grandmother dies. I don't know if this plays into the hauntings, but I think she might have tried to contact me. Now, a couple of weeks leading up to the baby being born, I thought I heard some weird things, saw shadows, and then when my son was born, even more weird stuff started happening. The radio would still turn itself on and crank the music all the way up, which was really bad when you're trying to keep your baby asleep. And one night, while everybody was sleeping, I went outside the front door to smoke a cigarette outside because I was not smoking around my baby at the time. And I'm still in a hallway, an enclosed porch where the stairs go down to another door that leads outside. And I'm sitting there at the top steps, smoking my cigarette, and it's kind of dark in there, only really street lights shining in. And all of a sudden at the bottom of the steps, I see an orb of light just materialize out of nowhere. It's nearly the size of a basketball, and it's just floating there about mid-chest height. and I'm looking at it, and I'm holding my cigarette, and I'm getting ready to freak out. Then it starts moving towards me, coming up the stairs. It would lift up and come down. It would lift up and then come down, just like somebody who's walking up the stairs. Well, it got about halfway up the steps, and I dropped my cigarette, ran inside, and closed the door. Immediately, I regretted what I was going to have to do, because I couldn't let that cigarette sit on the carpet out there and burn a hole in it. So I opened the door, grabbed it, and put it out. Thankfully, whatever it was gone. Fast forward a couple more days, me and my girlfriend are in the kitchen. Baby's asleep in the bedroom, which is 2 rooms away. The door's closed, and there's a baby monitor in there with him. And we have the receiver in the kitchen with us. And as we're sitting there, we start hearing what sounds like a woman talking. We both lean a little bit closer to the baby monitor to be sure what we're hearing. Can't tell what they're saying, but it's definitely a woman speaking. And then as soon as we come to the realization that we're hearing a voice coming from that room, my baby, Jaden, starts screaming. The most blood-curdling scream I've ever heard a baby ever scream. We looked at each other with eyes wide, and I hated that I had to be the one to go in first, but I wasn't about to let something hurt my baby. So I ran into the room. Nothing there. He's sound asleep, like he was never awake to begin with. That was one of the worst things that I've ever gone through. In my life, I've had many encounters with the paranormal, ghosts, etc. So to avoid going on too long, I'm going to stick to a period where I believe my sightings were all connected. It was the summer of 2008 or 2009. My family and I were always comfortable telling each other if we saw something odd or scary, so when it really ramped up, we couldn't stop talking about it. It was a hot summer and our electricity was off due to non-payment, so we always had plenty of candles at night for light. And one night, one of my many brothers and myself decided to play with a Ouija board with the rest of the family watching. And being smartasses, we asked if there were any spirits among us. Ready to laugh when the thing moved to the number 8. Me and my brother checked with each other, the typical, "I'm not moving it, are you?" "No." "You?" "No." So stupidly, I asked, "How many are demons?" And I shit you not, it moved to the number 6. 6 demons. We were done. We ended the session, but it didn't matter. Things were about to happen anyways. I can't remember what order each event happened, so the chronology might be wrong. One night, after using the board, I was standing in my living room, talking to my mother and one of her friends, when suddenly, right in front of both of them, I'm yanked hard by my hair straight down to the floor. Hard. I laid there for a good 10 seconds, blinking, trying to comprehend what just happened to me. Safe to say, everyone in the house is freaked out by now, me not being the only one having experiences. Different family members would tell me they see me walking back and forth in front of the house while I'm upstairs in my room. Nightmares, sleep paralysis, sleepwalking. This last part scared me more than most things in my entire life. I was home alone. Our electric was back on. I was walking out of my bedroom door to go downstairs to get a drink. I took one step on the stairs and thought I heard a footstep behind me. I paused. Nothing. Took another step, and in the next second I clearly heard the extra footsteps turn into running right at me. I turned wide-eyed, then I heard scraping on the walls, like nails ripping down. The chunks of paint from the walls flew off and hit me in the face. I stumbled down the stairs, half running, half shaking, and stood outside until everyone else was home. When they got home, I was pacing back and forth like the other me. To this day, not much has scared me like that did. These stories are a continuation of events that occurred following my brother and I using a Ouija board. So not long after the night, I was chased out of my house by something I couldn't see. I tried to busy myself at my computer to not be so paranoid all the time. One day, I'm editing movie scenes to make my own music videos, in my room completely alone, when suddenly an empty box that was sitting about 7 feet away from me sounded like it had been kicked, and at the same time the box bounced off the back of my head. Not hard enough to hurt, luckily the side of the box got me, but I was startled and spun around in my chair. Saw no one. Whispered, "What the hell?" Then to be less scared, I said aloud, "So you're throwing stuff at me now? Awesome." And left the room for a while. Another day, I was in my room doing much of the same as before, making videos that I would later in life know to be cringe. And I'm sitting facing my computer and had my bedroom door open. From where I was sitting off to my left, I can see the upstairs hallway where if you make a left, you pass a bathroom and it ends at another bedroom. To the right is the stairs that leads to the kitchen and the basement. While I'm sitting there, I clearly see my oldest niece, who was around 7 at the time, run past my door towards the back room. I smiled and said, "I saw you." Moved my cursor on the computer screen so it didn't accidentally click anything while I got up. I walked into the hallway, said, "I wonder if there's anybody up here." Looked into the back room, nobody. Kept walking through the hall to the back room and said, "Oh man, I can't find you." Still nothing. Nowhere left to check but the big walk-in closet. Then I say, I wonder where she is, expecting her to giggle and give away her position. Still nothing. I checked the closet and she isn't in there. My brain still didn't suspect a thing. I thought to myself, I must have sat at the computer longer than I thought, and she probably just went back downstairs. So I head down, and my mom was in the living room. I asked her where my niece is because she was running around upstairs. That's when she told me my niece wasn't there. In fact, she hadn't been there at all today. I don't know what I was playing hide and seek with, but it gives me such crazy chills I might not want to know. The last story I'll leave you with today is one I don't tell often. I feel like if I talk about him too much, he'll come back. So hopefully this will be the last time I feel compelled to tell. So one night, I'm in my room, door closed, playing Pokemon on my Nintendo DS. For those unfamiliar, it's a handheld game. And for whatever reason, I don't even remember, I had the light off, so my room was pitch black, except for the glow from my game. I'm laying on my bed, on my back, focused on the game. That's when I heard a sound like feet shuffling next to my bed. I turned the screen from my game to my right, where I heard the sound, and practically had a heart attack. Less than a foot from my face was a pair of legs, wearing blue jeans. I freaked out is an understatement. I jumped so bad I threw my game straight up into the air. This intensified my fear 100-fold. As the game was flipping through the air, I could get a good look at him. He was taller than the tallest person I've ever seen. His waist was a good 5 to 6 feet up, and his top half was hunched over and looked every bit of 10 feet tall. No face, just a giant man. When the game landed, I grabbed it as fast as I could and held it light side out towards the thing. It was gone as fast as it appeared. The moment I realized it was gone, I ran for the door, hitting the light switch and glancing around quickly on my way out. We call him the Tall Man. Had a few more encounters with him, but that was the worst. This series of stories takes place after my first encounter with the Tall Man. I'll label them Encounter 1, 2, 3, etc. Encounter 1. Electricity was back on and paranormal activity was at an all-time high. There was a lot of us living at home, so I shared my bedroom with my youngest brother Colton. I'm 13 years older than Colton and he's about 11 at the time, for context. So you have a better idea of the layout. The room isn't big, just a square, each wall about 10 feet long. There's 2 windows on separate walls on one corner of the room. The other side has 2 doors, one leading to the hallway, the other led to a small closet. So it's nighttime, don't know exactly when, but plenty dark, and me and my little brother invented a new game to scare each other, because apparently our house being haunted wasn't enough. The game goes like this. You turn off all the lights except a TV that you leave on a blue screen, so that the only light in the room is a blue glow. Then the one who is ready to be scared sits in the middle of the bed facing straight ahead. The other person gets on one side of the bed with your head level with theirs. Then you smile like the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland and very, very slowly inch your face closer to the one on the bed. The person on the bed can't turn their head towards you. They have to only look sideways, and they will see the person's face morphing in the blue light, and the face keeps changing as they get closer. Really scary eye trick. So we're wrapping up playing this game for a while. We had the lights back on, and we started joking about what would be scary. We say something about things moving on their own. Then I stand up and reach my hand towards my closet door handle, saying something about wouldn't it be crazy if the door opened on its own, and right as my hand was a couple of inches from the doorknob, right in front of both of us, the doorknob started jiggling and turning back and forth as if someone was frantically trying to get out of a locked room, which that door didn't have a lock. We swiftly booked it out of there and went downstairs for a while. Encounter 2. My family and I were having a ghost hunt night that we regularly did at least once a week after activity seemed unending. We'd turn off all the lights in the house and anything that made noise, so the whole house would be dark and quiet for us to split up and post up in different areas of the house and wait for something to happen, which it always did. One night we were split up and I landed in the basement alone this time. The other places we'd split up to would be the landing between the basement stairs and the stairs to the second floor, and my room, which I thought was the most haunted, but would think differently later. So I'm in the basement alone, pitch black aside from a street light that could be seen shining in the front half of the basement. I stood near that since I was admittedly scared of the back half of the basement. I was armed with nothing but my phone, using the Ghost Radar Classic as one does, seeing what words pop up. It said 2 words that were significant, the first being underground and the second being railroad. During this time, we discovered there was an old underground railroad that went right under where our house was. So underground had me thinking the radar was just lucky because I was in the basement. Then it said railroad right after that, and now I was getting scared. Didn't have to wait long for it to get worse, because almost immediately after reading that, something, I don't know what, I assume the tall man, stepped in between me and the window, completely blocking out the light from the window. I'm suddenly plunged into darkness. My eyes were bugging out of my head, and I was too scared to speak. I just slowly turned around and walked back upstairs, hoping whatever it was didn't pull me back in the basement. Thankfully, I got back up the stairs unharmed. Encounter 3, another ghost hunt night, possibly the same night. I was posted up with my brother Colton on the landing between stairs. We were sitting on a cooler with our backs to the wall. From where we were sitting, we had a view of the basement stairs to the left of us, the kitchen in front of us, and the stairs up to the second floor to our right. I'm sitting on the left side of the cooler closest to the basement, and he's on the right. So we're sitting there for a good 5 to 10 minutes, letting our eyes adjust to the dark, and we both found ourselves mostly looking up the stairs to the right. Our eyes both fixed on a certain shadow at the bottom left corner of the top of the stairs that looked like something crawled out of my room and was now crouched at the top of the stairs like a small 2-foot gargoyle statue. With all the things happening lately, we both quietly checked with each other. "Do you see that?" With the reply, "That thing at the top of the stairs? Yeah, I see it." Then I say, "Whatever you do, don't move. Let's see what it does." A couple seconds go by, and it looked different. Now it looked like it was crawling down the stairs face first, and we didn't even see it move. But as we're watching it, it was moving again, crawling slowly down towards us. Its movements were so slow, if we weren't paying such close attention, we wouldn't have noticed it was moving. Slow as possible, inch by inch, it crawled towards us. When it got almost halfway down the stairs, We heard something in the opposite direction, like shoes scuffing a step coming from the basement, so our heads whip around in that direction. Now we're completely forgot about the thing on the stairs and are staring hard towards the basement. I heard what sounded like someone exhaling a breath after holding it for a while, and before I could mention it, something happened. I'm 5'9", 145 pounds, and a hand large enough to grab my entire lower back from one side of me to the other grabbed me and stood me up. It lifted me up slightly higher than my height, so I landed on my feet from a few inches up. I told my brother, okay, that's it, and went into the living room, turned on the light, and told everybody what happened. At first, my thought was the tall man. Then I thought about how that hand felt on my back. If it was attached to a beam, it would be at least 25 to 30 foot tall person, a little bigger than the tall man was. Encounter 4. The last story I'm going to leave you with in this episode is just the first of many increasingly more violent demonic attacks, not on me but on my mother. Already bedridden because of rapidly growing cancer, uterine cancer. There's no way in hell I would prank her or do anything to scare her on purpose. For one, that's who I am, have had too many real things happen to make up something. And two, I was a total mama's boy who would never scare my mama. That being said, I've mentioned before that my parents would occasionally see an entity that makes itself look like me, and this is where that becomes more disturbing. So like I said, my mother is bedridden, and she sleeps in a room between our living room and the kitchen, and from where her bed is, she has a straight-on view into the kitchen, where at the farthest end is the refrigerator, and to the left of that is the stairwell. She's laying in bed when she sees this thing that looks like me walk into the kitchen from the stairwell, stop in front of the fridge, and slowly turn towards her and stared. She said things like, "What do you want? Hello? Why are you staring? Okay, you're starting to freak me out." The other me didn't respond, just turned and walked back to the stairs. I wasn't even home at the time. This happened again soon after. She was bedridden, but my mom still pushed her limits and could still get to the bathroom and such. One day she was walking to the stairs to yell up to me to come down, and when she got to the bottom of the stairs, I was already standing at the top of the stairs, only I wasn't. She tried to communicate with it as if it were me, and the same as before, a blank stare before turning and walking towards my room. Coincidentally, I was in my room and I heard my mom's voice outside my door. So I open the door, peek around the corner, and see Mom at the bottom of the stairs. I asked if she was yelling for me. She said she was just talking to me, and I went into my room. After swearing up and down I was in my room the whole time and just came out because I heard her voice, she had to admit that the other me didn't open the door, he just vanished. Then I popped my head out of my door. We were both thoroughly freaked out. I personally was pissed off that this thing was impersonating me. The next day or so, it would give up on looking like me. My mom was on her bed again, same as the first time, but this time an all-black shadow person would walk in from the stairwell, stop in front of the fridge, and turn and stare at my mother. This time it didn't look like me, and my mother was terrified. She just sat there staring, afraid to speak, afraid to move. Then it suddenly rushed at her so fast she couldn't react. It grabbed both her arms at the elbow and slammed her back onto the bed. She was sitting up high on the bed, and there was a window behind her, and the back of her head was slammed into the windowsill. It was too strong, she couldn't move. She tried to scream for help and nothing could come out. As suddenly as it attacked it, it disappeared. I can't describe how scared for her me and my dad and my brothers were. The fact that these shadow person encounters continued after and into my mother's final days will always haunt me, but I'll rest my stories for now. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.